จะแบ่งออกเป็น2เซสชันก็คือเซสชันแรกในวันนี้แล้วก็อีกเซสชันหนึ่งก็จะเป็นวันพฤหัสบดีที่23มิถุนายน2565นะคะแล้วก็ตอนนี้ก็ค่อนข้างจะได้เวลาแล้วนะคะเดี๋ยวเราจะขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญท่านดร.ลินซึ่งเป็นผู้แทนจาก Clarivate เป็นผู้เชี่ยวชาญของ Clarivate นะคะมาให้เทรนนิ่งกับเรา Good morning Dr. Julin.
Good morning.
Hi. So I think this is the good time for giving us the training for InCites training for Mahidol University IR staff and so I think it will be benefit for our staff to how to use the InCites for IR work. So I would like to invite you to give us the training. So Dr. Lin, please.
Thank you, Miss Kanita. So very good morning, Sawadika, everyone. I'm very happy to always be here to help Mahidol University reach out to the international audience. And this tool that I'm going to share with you today is InCites Benchmarking and Analytics. And it is a tool that you can use to analyze not just Mahidol University's research. You can also look for international collaborators using this particular tool. So how do you identify who is actually the important researchers that you might want to reach out to for your own particular research topic? Okay, so today's session, I think Ms. Kanita, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about 1.5 hours for today's session. Yeah. So depending on the number of questions we have, we might take up the full 90 minutes. If not, then it'll be slightly less. All right. So through today's session, because I think everyone is on mute, so if you have any questions, if I'm going too fast, feel free to type those questions and comments into the chat box. Okay, the session is also being recorded, so in the event that you miss out any parts, you can always review the recording. All right. So let me just share my screen. I have my colleague here as well. So I have my new colleague from based in Bangkok. So his name is Tom, and or in Thai name is Tom Harit. Yeah. So he is the account manager for Thailand. So in the event that you have any questions that you have in Thai, I think he'll be able to help me quickly translate those questions in the chat box as well. All right. So let me just get the ball rolling. So I'm going to stop my video because my computer doesn't really like me to do multiple things at the same time. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Can you confirm that you can see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to introduce myself, my name is Julin, and I'm the Regional Solution Consultant from Clarivate. My main role is actually to help researchers or even faculty members like yourself make full use of the resources that have been subscribed by Mahidol University. So for today, as I mentioned earlier on, we are focusing on InCites. And I understand that there are some existing users of InCites as well as new users. So what I'll be covering will be a bit of both. So a bit of foundational information about what InCites is, and then also giving you some ideas of what new features there are on the platform. If time permits, I will also be able to share with you some of the typical use cases that you can do to reach out to international researchers to collaborate. Okay. So this is a bit of today's agenda. I'll be going through some of the commonly used InCites indicators. So these are some of the metrics that are available on the InCites platform that you can use to measure the performance of research. Okay, it can be research from Mahidol, it can also be research from other international organizations or researchers. Then we will then dive into the commonly used research area schemas. Okay, so we do understand that you come from different fields or different areas of research, but there are different ways of categorizing research areas. And within InCites, we have different ways of using these schemas for analysis. Subsequently, I will then go into retrieving the country and institutional data from InCites. So especially for those who are new to the tool, this is the part where I will show you some of the key features on how to navigate the platform. Okay? And then finally, we will look at an institution's research strengths using some of these metrics and schemas that I have introduced. So to get you started, especially for those who are new, why is it important to use a tool like InCites benchmarking and analytics? It is to address the increasingly competitive global research landscape. I think a lot of times, number one, every researcher is vying for research grants and funding. So how do these funders actually determine whether your research is good enough or strong enough to provide funding for? This is where they will be looking at tools like InCites benchmarking to retrieve some past information of what your research has achieved. So looking at how well your previous research has performed, to demonstrate how successful your research has been in addressing things like social issues and so on. Okay? So a tool like InCites will allow you to benchmark your research against other peers. It could be peer institutions, it could be peer researchers. Okay? And also, it's a tool that you can use to assess your existing collaborations. So perhaps Mahidol University has already collaborated a lot with institutions in perhaps Japan. Okay, how has that collaboration what has that collaboration brought to Mahidol University in terms of research impact? All this information can be retrieved from InCites. So within the tool itself, you will be able to see a series of citation indicators. So we have indicators to help you to benchmark yourself against other institutions. Profiling the research impact is no longer just about citation counts. You need to be able to use normalized indicators like the category normalized citation impact. Okay, so when I say normalized indicators, what do I mean? It means that the citation performance of the papers have already been uh, aggregated against the other papers from that same field or same research area or same document type. So with this normalization, it will then help you to easily compare, say, a business research paper with another paper in engineering. Okay, because without normalizing, you will not be able to compare to see, hey, is this business paper performing better than the engineering paper? Okay, you will need normalized indicators to do this. We also have collaboration indicators to help you assess your collaborations. At the same time, we also have open access information and also flexible evaluation schemas that you can utilize, like what I mentioned earlier on, which are the research area schemas. So where does this data come from? Okay, so the InCites benchmarking and analytics tool takes the data from the Web of Science. I think many of the researchers on the call would be very familiar with the Web of Science, and the data source for InCites when you do analysis comes from the Web of Science core collection. So this would include all the journals that are indexed in Web of Science core collection. So journals from Science Citation Index Expanded, Social Science Citation Index, Emerging Sources Citation Index, Arts and Humanities Citation Index, and also the conference proceedings and the books citation indexes. So all these data has been imported into InCites so that you can do further deeper analysis about the research output. Also, something that might be of interest to the Mahidol community is that a lot of world-leading ranking bodies and assessment bodies like Shanghai Ranking, for example, and US News, they all use the Web of Science core collection data when they are doing these ranking activities. Okay. Now, before I go into the indicators and the schemas to explain the details, okay, just wanted to highlight that since the last training that we had for Mahidol University, we had some new features added to the platform. And one of these interesting features that I thought I wanted to highlight was the additional funding grants information that you can retrieve from InCites. So we have included two new filters. So you can actually filter down to use these filters for your analysis. We have also incorporated 3 new indicators. Now these indicators are the currency value. So what's the value of the currency used? Is it US dollars, yen, or euros, for example? And then the grant award amount will also be reflected, and the grant number of grants. Okay. So let's move ahead with the commonly used InCites indicators. This will be very much a refresher for those who have attended the previous training sessions last year, but also is of benefit to those who are new. Okay? So when you're looking at InCites platform, sometimes new users will tend to be very overwhelmed with the number of indicators that we have. So I always like to give you some kind of framework to utilize when you want to, say, retrieve a profile of an institution or a researcher. Okay, so some of these commonly used indicators are in this following slides. Something to do with productivity. So if you want to, say, compare institutions based on productivity, these are two of the indicators that you could consider using. And I encourage you to do that. So the first indicator is the total Web of Science documents. So as its name suggests, it means that this is the total number of documents published on the Web of Science. Then the other indicator is the number of publications in JIF. So what is JIF? So these are journals that have a journal impact factor. So these are documents published in a journal found with the journal impact factor. So these are usually the articles that are published in SCIE, which is the Science Citation Index Expanded, or the Social Science Citation Index. Then we move on to the quality and impact. So these are some of the indicators that you can utilize. So publications, number of publications in Q1. So Q1 refers to quartile 1 journals and all JIF journals. Okay. Then subsequently, for impact, you could look at category normalized citation impact, CNCI. I will be referring to this particular indicator quite regularly through the training session. Okay. So what is CNCI? It is a indicator for citation performance that has been normalized by publication date, subject area, and document type. Okay, so what we've done is we've taken all the citation counts of papers in the same document type, in the same subject area, the same publication date to derive this particular indicator. So to make it easier for you to understand, the value of 1 always represents the global average, CNCI. Okay, I repeat, the value of 1 CNCI will always represent the global average. So what does this mean? It means that if you see that an institution has a CNCI of above 1, meaning perhaps 2 or 3 or 1.5, okay, it means that that institution is performing above global performance, above global average. If you see that the institution's CNCI is below 1, it means that it is performing below global average. Okay, so this is very straightforward to understand. So in essence, if you are comparing, say, research papers in business versus research papers in engineering, if you're looking at the CNCI, if the business paper is at 1.5 and the engineering paper is at 0.8. Okay, you can confidently say that the business paper is outperforming the other papers in its own field. Okay, so it makes it easier to compare the two. The next other set of indicators that I wanted to bring to your attention is the performance indicators. So we have the percentage of documents in the top 1% and top 10%. So documents in the top 1% and 10% would mean that these papers have citation counts that put them in the top 1% or 10% of their field. All right. Then for percentage of hot papers are the papers that are published in the more recent 2 years that have enough citations in the past 2 months to put them in the top 0.1% of their field. Okay, so to make it simpler, I've put in brackets what each of these would represent. It means that this would be the percentage of excellent papers for the top 1%. These are the percentage of high performing papers, which are those in the top 10%. And then the elite papers, these are papers in the top 0.1%. Makes it easier for you to remember. We also have collaboration indicators, like the international collaborations and the domestic collaborations. These two are very straightforward, and it has been there for a while already on InCites. So international collaborations would represent those papers that have at least 2 different authors from 2 different countries. Okay, so as long as there's different countries within the same paper, then that is considered an international collaborated paper. For the domestic collaborations, these are papers that do not have other countries in the authors. So meaning that the 2 authors are from different organizations, but their addresses are all from the same country. And that is what we refer to as domestic collaboration. We have also got the industry collaboration. So in the event that the paper has a co-author that comes from a corporate entity. So an example could be like 3M, Tesla, or whichever the biopharma companies, Pfizer. Okay, so as long as there's an industry partner, then that is considered an industry collaborated paper. Now, there is also a new, fairly new indicator that we released sometime last year, which is the organization-only collaboration. Okay, these are papers where there are 2 or more authors from the same address, okay, and they will be considered as the organization-only collaboration. We also have author positions that you can filter down to. So when you are looking at these various indicators, you can also utilize some of these filters on author positions to help you further analyze your set of documents. Okay, so you can analyze Mahidol's papers that have been first authored by Mahidol authors, last authored by Mahidol authors, or corresponding authored by Mahidol authors. Okay, author position is something that you would use to try and fish out those papers that are led by your organization or that particular organization that you're looking at. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pause and have a look at the chat to see whether there's been any questions. Okay, I encourage you to type questions as we go through the session, because I don't want you to miss out on asking important questions that might, if you are a bit lost. Okay, so I encourage you to just type in questions as and when you think of one, so that we can address that as we go through. Okay, so there's a question here from Wanaruk. So how well does Web of Science or InCites can help and analyze social science works? That's a very good question. So later on, when I go through the research area schemas, you will be able to see that we do address the social sciences as well. But the naming of those research areas or topics could be slightly different depending on the schema that you use. Okay. Most welcome, Wanaruk. Okay, so there's no other questions. Let me just move on to the next segment then. So I've introduced you to some of the commonly used indicators. You can use those indicators for profiling an institution, your own research area, or even a researcher. Okay, but at the same time, you might want to look at specific research areas as well, like what Wanaruk has mentioned. So I'm going to introduce you to the research area schemas that we have on InCites. And depending on your use case or depending on what are the questions that you need answered, you would utilize different schemas. Okay. So the most common one, which is the most commonly utilized one across both Web of Science as well as InCites, is the Web of Science subject category schema. So this is the category schema that is utilized on the Web of Science platform. So for any journals that are indexed in Web of Science, they will be assigned to one of these subject categories. So there are a total of 254 subject categories here. And this is a classification for journals. So just take note. This is a classification for journals, meaning the journals will be assigned to one subject category. Okay. Just take note, sometimes the journals do get assigned to more than one subject categories. So if you're using this schema for analysis, sometimes there is double counting. Okay, so meaning that it could fall under multiple subject categories. The other schema that I always like to recommend is the citation topics schema. Okay, so earlier on, the Web of Science schema is a journal level classification. The citation topic schema is what we consider an article level classification, meaning the articles will then be assigned to a specific research topic. So how is this done? It has been a collaboration with Leiden University CWTS institution, as well as ISI. With this collaboration, what we've done is we have classified the papers according to the citation relationships between the documents. So if they are cited fairly frequently together, then that's when we cluster them into a specific topic cluster, and we will give them a specific name for that topic. So this schema is very useful if you are looking at a more accurate picture of an institution's research strength. Okay? Because if you use the previous schema, which is the Web of Science schema, number one, there could be double counting. Number two, it is a journal classification. So what does this mean? It means that more and more so, journals are publishing multiple types of topics within their own journal. So if it's just being classified under a very general subject category, then the accuracy or the clarity of your research strengths becomes a little bit weaker. Whereas for the citation topic schema, because it's an article level classification, it is a more accurate portrayal of the actual research topic itself. Okay. So how does this citation topics work? Okay, if you want to evaluate Mahidol University's research strengths or research areas, you are able to look at the broad categories, and this is what we call the macro topics. So the macro topics, there are 10, and under each of those macro topics, there will be subtopics. So subtopics will be under meso, so meso level. And under the subtopics, there will be subtopics. So these are what we call the micro topics. So you are able to evaluate the research from broad to narrow, depending on the subject category. Now, an example that I have here on the screen is for chemistry. So say, for example, you are looking at the area of chemistry. Under chemistry, you have many different subtopics. So one of such topics is the organic semiconductors. Okay, and this is denoted by the single decimal point. But under organic semiconductors, you could also have many different topics. So under organic semiconductors, one example is OLEDs. So this is then denoted by an extra decimal point. Right? So this is how the structure is for the citation topics schema. We have also introduced new research area schemas in InCites this year. And the first one is the SDG schema, so Sustainable Development Goals. This was launched earlier in the year, and we have included 1 to 16. Okay, so we have included the SDG goals 1 to 16 into this schema, and you can now map Mahidol University's research areas against these 16 SDG goals. Another new schema that we have introduced is the Shanghai ranking graphs schema. So this is the schema that has been utilized for the Shanghai ranking purposes. And this is the 54 academic subject categorization for Shanghai ranking. So if you want to map your research against the Shanghai ranking schema, you can also do so now. Okay. So I've introduced the indicators, I've introduced the schemas, and that is the backbone of what you require to understand the utilization of InCites. Now we go into a hands-on session so that I can bring you through how you can build a research profile for the institution that you look at. It could be Mahidol, it could be other institutions around the region. So just to give you an example, I'm going to put in this profile, this framework here. So if you forget everything that I said, okay, this is probably the one most important slide that you would have to remember when you want to use InCites. Okay, so whenever you want to retrieve information or profile an institution, okay, make use of this framework that I have on the screen. So this framework shows you all the indicators that you need to retrieve in order to have a very balanced view of the research performance and impact of that organization. So you can see here we have productivity, quality, collaborations, research impact, research performance, and the associated indicators that you can pull out from InCites. Okay, so to use this framework, this is what you can use to start extracting data from the InCites platform. Okay, this is a bit of a busy picture, okay, but this is an example of the data that I have retrieved from InCites. So if I want to compare Mahidol University with other universities around the region, I can easily filter down to those relevant ones. So perhaps I want to compare Mahidol with Chulalongkorn University, University of Hong Kong, NUS from Singapore, National Taiwan University or University of Malaya. I would just have to extract these information from InCites. This visualization or graph is what we call the scatter plot that is available as a visualization on InCites. What I like about using this particular scatter plot is that it allows you to visualize 3 indicators on one chart. So you can see the research impact based on CNCI, the productivity based on Web of Science documents, and the size of the bubble, size of the circle here, will represent percentage of documents in the top 10%, which is what we call performance. So immediately with this chart, you can then see how each of these institutions are doing against each other. Within the labeling here, these are the data points that I have extracted as so that I can show you what we can represent for each institution. The other visualization that you can utilize on InCites is what we call the impact profile. So this allows you to compare the research impact of the organizations based on CNCI, so category normalized citation impact. So if you remember my definition of CNCI, any value that is 1 represents the global average performance. On the right-hand side, these are buckets that represent those that are performing above 1.0, meaning they are performing above global average. On the left, these are papers that are performing below 1.0, meaning they are performing below global average. So with this chart, you can easily see which institutions have more papers that are performing higher than average and which are below average. Okay, so this allows you to compare the institutions based on their ultimate research impact. Okay, I'm going to pause here before I go into the platform to address any questions. So while I'm setting up on the live platform, feel free to type any questions you have of what I've just presented on my slides. Okay, so for those who are new users, please take note that you will need to register for your own account on InCites. Okay, so even though InCites is an IP activated product, okay, but every single user who wants to use InCites will need to register for their own ID and password. So how can you do this? You have to be on Mahidol University's IP range. So either you access Mahidol University's internet via the on-campus, or you could, if there's a VPN or easy proxy or off-campus authentication, you will need to authenticate through that first before you come into the InCites platform. Okay. Once you're on the InCites platform, you then follow the instructions to register for your own ID and password. And once you've registered, you will then be able to see your own email address right here. I encourage you to use your Mahidol University's email address to do this registration. For those of you who had previously used Web of Science before, okay, if you already have a Web of Science login, you can use that same email address to register. Okay. So once you're on InCites platform, this is the homepage that you would see. The first thing is to show you a quick report. So for those who are new, if you want to just quickly see a quick organization report for each institution, we have these overview reports here that you can access. So just click on organization report. And you can just type in the institution that you want to see. So let's say I'm looking for Mahidol University. Okay, so we have Mahidol University here. You can set a date range for this report. So if you have 2010 to 2021, this is the default. You can set this accordingly to what you want to see. There are 4 tabs here. So you have the Research Performance tab, Collaboration tab, Journal Utilization tab, and Most Cited Documents tab. All these data points will be reflecting Mahidol University's performance in each of these areas. Under Research Performance, you would see an overview that shows you the papers that have been published in the various research areas based on GIPP research area. So GIPP is another research schema that we have on InCites, but this gives you a high level categorization. So these fall under 6. So like you can see here, there's also one for social sciences. And then you have the clinical, life sciences, physical sciences, engineering, and arts. For the WAS categories, these are just a snapshot of the 254 subject categories under Web of Science. So each of this would represent the number of documents that Mahidol University has published in each of these subject areas. If you want to go into the details, there is a link here to click on to view the data, and that will bring you to the raw data that would show the other 200 plus research areas. Now, under the productivity segment, we have documents published each year by Mahidol University, as well as the time cited. Okay. Then we also have the CNCI and the documents published per quartile. Okay, so number of documents for Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So one interesting thing about this particular chart is you are able to immediately see the baselines for comparison as well. So what are baselines? Baselines are like an indicator of the performance, average performance or average CNCI for that particular group. So say, for example, here it says baseline Thailand. Maybe let me just zoom in a little bit more so that it becomes a bit clearer. Okay. So you can see that the baseline for Thailand for 2021 is at 1.04 CNCI. It means that on average, the total, all of Thailand's research is averaging at around 1.04 CNCI. So for Mahidol University, you're performing here at 1.12. It means that you're performing better than average for Thailand. This is the baseline for the world. So you can see it's very close to 1. Okay. And therefore you can now compare not just yourself against Thailand, yourself against global is also on the same chart. If you scroll down, you can also view CNCI by each subject category. So in this case, it's based on GIPP. Later on, I will show you how you can customize this to see the CNCI for each of the other research areas schemas. At the bottom, you see here the citation word cloud. Okay, so this is based on the micro citation topic. So remember my slide on citation topic schema. This is the micro level. So immediately you can see that Mahidol University has published a large number of papers in around the topic of malaria as well as dengue. Okay, some of these other topics are also here. And if you hover over each of those terms, you will see the number of papers. Under collaboration tab, this is where you see the international collaborations, collaborations by subject areas, by country. Okay, so this particular chart here is something interesting that I wanted to highlight. Okay, so for here, you would see that you have large number of collaborations domestically. So you have Thailand collaborations here across the board for all these subject areas. But you could also use this to say, hey, under infectious diseases, I also have a large number of collaborations with UK or England. So the reason why there's UK and England is because UK incorporates the other parts of the UK. Okay, whereas this is specific to England. Yeah. So you can see here immediately which are what is the number of papers that you have collaborated for each subject area for each country. Okay. Then the collaborating institutes are here. If you want to just look at the academic organizations, there is also a chart here on the right. The other two tabs I will go through very quickly. So journal utilization will give you information about how Mahidol University authors are performing in the journals that they are publishing in, and also which journals that that Mahidol University authors are publishing in more, right? There's also citation information, so meaning which are the journals where Mahidol universities are being cited, and which of those where Mahidol universities are citing. Okay. And as its name suggests, the most cited documents list would be those that have the highest citation counts coming from Mahidol University. Okay, so this organization overview report is a very simple, straightforward report that you can retrieve for the different institutions that you want. So if you want to save some time in trying to do a custom analysis, you can look into this report first before you deep dive into some customization for the analysis. Okay, this can be shared via email to anybody, but they will be seeing this as a report, as a PDF. Okay. All right, so this is the overview report. Let me now deep dive into the analysis. So if you want to do some custom analysis, how can you do that? But before that, I encourage you, please type in your questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'll assume that everything is crystal clear and that everyone is following what I'm saying. Okay. So let's go into retrieving country level information first. Okay, so let's say if you want to compare Thailand versus another country, you can go to the analysis for locations. Okay, so let's go to locations. Okay. And one thing that you would notice is that it's very simple. It's a very simple and clear-cut layout where you have your filters, indicators, and baselines on the left, and then the table of information on the right. So this table is populated depending on the indicators that you have included for your analysis. So for today, if you want to compare, say, Thailand against another country, you could actually put in Thailand with the other relevant countries. So let's say Malaysia, Vietnam, Australia, Taiwan. Okay, so you just put in the different countries into this particular field here. Once you've done that, it will populate the table. Once you have included the relevant countries you want to analyze, then the next thing is to add the relevant indicators. So you remember the framework that I had shown you on that one slide? This is when you start to populate the indicators in this second tab here. So here you would then immediately see Web of Science documents, click into this and you see a quick explanation. If you haven't added this indicator into the table, there will be an add functionality here that you can click. If there's any particular one that you want to include, so percentage of documents in Q1, then click on that and click add. Okay. So once you've done that, it will add to the end of the table. Okay. Sometimes for administrative purposes, you might also want to be able to retrieve the actual documents instead of percentages. So each of these percentages usually come with a whole document count. So if you want the Q1 documents, just add this. Okay. And even collaboration. So if you want to see the collaboration, international collaborated papers, there is a whole number value there. Okay, so once you've included that, you would see these two columns here. So for Thailand, you have 18,630 documents under Q1 journals published between 2017 to 2021. For international collaborated papers, you have 41,249. So if you want to extract this data, this full list of 41,000, just click on this number. It will show you all the publications and download. So you can then download this into a CSV format for your reporting purposes. So once you get more familiar with the indicators here, you don't have to go into this tab to add the indicators one at a time. There is a shortcut. So we have this quick add button. So you can add indicators here immediately or remove. So for those that you want to remove, you can just deselect them. So if I want to deselect percentage of documents cited, I want to include industry collaboration, domestic collaboration, okay, or first author, corresponding author, and you apply. Then immediately all the different indicators will be here on the table. Okay. So then once you want to do some visualization and compare, so sometimes by looking at the table, it's not so easy to say which are the countries that are better performing than the other. That's where you utilize visualizations. So there's a visualization tab here, and you can choose from the different visualizations we have here on the screen. So for comparison purposes, scatter plots are usually the ones that I utilize, or impact profiles. So for scatter plot, this is how it looks like. You can visualize up to 15 rows of the table. Okay, so for here, I've included 5, so that's why it's at 5. And you can then dictate which indicators you want for each axis. Okay, and let's go for documents in top 1% as the size. So immediately you see that Australia is leading the way. It's performing above global average for CNCI, and it also has the highest one of the highest percentage of documents in top 1% in comparison to the others in the chart. Okay. For the other visualizations here, okay, impact profiles. If you choose CNCI, you would immediately see the how the papers are categorized into each of the buckets for CNCI. If you want to save this, or perhaps you have done a very complicated analysis and you don't want to keep repeating this same analysis over and over again, but you just want to perhaps update the data on a monthly basis, you can save this into a report. So once you're on visual, there is a functionality here called add to report. So you can add this to an existing report that you might already have, or create a new one. So if you want to create a new report, you can just click on this plus icon here to create a new report. Otherwise, I'm going to see whether I have something for Mahidol. So I have this. So I'm going to just save this under Mahidol Training 2021 and save it. So the next time I can just go to that particular report for Mahidol Training 2021 to retrieve the most latest data. Okay. So this is retrieving the country information. Okay. Coming back to the table, I think one thing I haven't showed you is to extract the exporting the data. So if you want to export this data, meaning it's just the whole number, which is 2017 to 2021 in total, okay, then just click on this download icon here and click on download. Okay. Once you click on download and you open up this downloaded Excel file, okay, you can notice that the numbers are the same, right? So this is the total Web of Science documents for Australia, 607,228. If you come back to here, it's 607,228. Okay, so this is the exact table that you are exporting together with the indicators on this table. If you want to export a series, so meaning that you want it to be broken down into individual years, meaning 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, then you remember to tick trend data. Okay, so remember to click on trend data and download. Okay, so once you exported this, let's take a look at this Excel. So you can see now it has been broken down into the 5 publication years, 2017 to 2021 for each country. Okay. The next analysis that perhaps you might want to consider, okay, is for institution. So if you want to compare Mahidol University with other institutions, the analysis that you would want to jump to is organizations. Okay, so let's go to organizations. This is something that I have already populated. So this was exactly what I had on my presentation slide earlier on, a comparison of Mahidol University with these other institutions. Okay, let's hit the top. Okay, so there is this functionality called pin to top, where you can select the institution and pin it up onto the table. Okay, this is very useful when you have a very long list of organizations to look at. So perhaps you don't want to lose some of these institutions that you wanted to see immediately. So you can just bring the ones that you want to see to the top. Okay. So I've included the individual organizations here for comparison. Okay. The other way that you can compare institutions is perhaps you want to look at institutions from one country. You can actually do that as well. So let me just remove these pins and clear this filter. Okay. And you can also set the date range. So let's look at the 5 complete years. Okay. Here, there are some filters. So you can use these filters to help you narrow down this list that you have. So if you want to find institutions from a specific country, the filter that you would use is the location filter. Okay. And if I want to look at Thailand, I would choose Thailand. Okay. If you want to look at a particular region, okay, you can also put in things like Asia Pacific or ASEAN. Okay, so if you put ASEAN, this will only show you the 528 organizations in ASEAN countries. And you can then start to benchmark Mahidol University with those across the ASEAN nations. So if you want to compare Mahidol Universities, just pin Mahidol University to the top. And that will make sure that Mahidol University will always be here, and you can start comparing against these other selected institutions. The other filter that you could utilize is when you want to analyze your social sciences work, for example, like what Wanarup had mentioned, social sciences. This is where you make use of the filter for research areas. So perhaps you want to compare Mahidol's papers against the other institutions around the region for, say, any of these categories. Okay, or you could also change the subject area schema. So earlier on, I mentioned about citation topics. I mentioned about sustainable development goals. I mentioned about Shanghai grass and so on. So if you want to compare Mahidol University in specific topic areas, you could use citation topics, and let's choose social sciences and update. So then this gives you the number of papers. So these 759 papers are those published under social sciences by Mahidol University from 2017 to 2021. And you would see the relevant indicators here. So you have the CNCI, percentage of international collaboration, percentage of documents in top 1%, and so on, depending on what you want to see. There is also a new indicator that we have included, which is the citations from patents. So you will be able to see whether any of these documents have been cited by patents, and the numbers will be reflected here. Okay. If you want to change the topic areas, you can also do this for meso level. So if there is a specific area, so let's look at see. Okay, so perhaps you want to maybe see whether there's any papers on rheumatology. Okay, then Mahidol University has 138 papers on rheumatology, and in comparison to the other institutions around the world, around the region, this is where you stand in terms of Web of Science documents. Okay, so we can put the rank right here. So this rank number is very useful when you want to say, hey, I've sought this list based on Web of Science documents. So Mahidol University is ranked number 3 in terms of rheumatology topic across these ASEAN countries, these ASEAN institutions. Okay. You could also do additional filtrations here. So things like international collaborations, you can do so. So perhaps you want to limit this down to only those papers that have been internationally collaborated, domestic collaborated, or internal collaborated. Or you might want to compare based on open access, how much of those papers are open access. And you could also filter this by author position. So how much of these papers are actually first authored or corresponding authored? So let's look at corresponding authored and first authored and update. So 103 of these papers have been first authored and corresponding authored by Mahidol University. And when you look at the authorship, this then places you in rank number 2 for the rheumatology papers. Okay. Okay, so this is how you can make use of the organization analysis to compare institutions. The collaboration, so if you want to easily identify potential collaborators for, say, rheumatology, okay, this is also one way that you can take a look at the other institutions around the region. If you don't want to limit this to a region, you can remove this filter. So I remove ASEAN. Then this becomes the institutions around the world that are publishing on rheumatology. And these are papers that those institutions are corresponding authored or first author of. And immediately you can see who potentially you could collaborate with. Okay. So I'm going to pause here. Okay, Wanaruk, you have another question. Can you elaborate more on last author? So the authorship positions, sometimes it depends on the subject specialization. Most subject specializations have the first author as the lead researcher, meaning that person is the one that does most of the work. Then the supervisor is sometimes the last author, but for certain specializations, they could also be the kind of the lead. Okay, so depending on the specialization, the first author and the last author usually represents the role that they play in that research. So sometimes it could be a supervisory role, so it could be the professor supervising the research, and so on. Okay, so that's the last author position. For corresponding author, it's basically the author that you should reach out to if you want to discuss about that research. Sometimes it can be the first author as well, or sometimes it could be the supervisor or the supervisor from that institution. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Wanaruk. Okay, so let me see the time. Okay, we're okay. So I'm going to pause here to see whether there's any more questions. I'm not sure whether you can unmute yourself. So if anybody wants to try and unmute yourself to ask any questions, you can also do so. Okay. No, then I will go back into my slides to move on to the next few segments. Okay, so I'm just going to jump to research areas. Okay, so this is where you start to look at the institution's research strengths. I've already shown you a bit of a glance into it by using the filters. Okay, but this time around, if you want to look at a specific institution itself, then this is where you can start looking at the research area analysis. Okay, Wanaruk, you have a question. When do I include only first and last? Or in terms of the filters here, it will be end. So here the author position is usually an end. So if you include only first and corresponding author, it will be here as it is. There is no or functionality. Oh, sorry. It will be either first or corresponding author. So meaning it will show both. If it's the first author, it's corresponding author, it will show both. Okay. But usually it will not show both end, right? So it doesn't work like how you would search in a Boolean search string on the Web of Science database, right? Okay, so let me go back to my slides. Okay, so the research area schema or analysis can be broken down by the schemas. So you can actually limit this down to Web of Science research areas, citation topics, GIPP, SDG, and so on. All right. And this is an example of the analysis that you could do. So for Mahidol University's 10 broad research areas, this one I've utilized the macro topics, okay, for citation topics. So you can see here how Mahidol University is doing across each of these research areas. By plotting this on a scatter plot, it also shows you some kind of a SWOT analysis. So for example, here on the top right, these would be research areas that have high output and high impact, okay, because they are performing above average in terms of CNCI. Then over here, you have high output, low impact, then low output, high impact, and low output, low impact. So this gives you an opportunity to say, hey, there is one particular area here for physics, okay, that is showing very high impact value, okay, because it's performing at around close to 2 CNCI. Then this gives you a chance to deep dive into these 210 papers to say, where did this research come from? Is it purely led by Mahidol University, or has it been because of some collaboration? Because as you can see here, the percentage of international collaboration here is quite high. Okay, so this gives you another perspective that you could explore. So for now, the high output, high impact research areas that Mahidol University has is around clinical and life sciences. Okay. If you want to see this data in the table, this is what you can export from InCites. Okay. And if you want to deep dive into the mid-level, which we call meso level, then you can also look at these data. Okay. So out of the life sciences, clinical and life sciences papers, you have high performance for parasitology, which is inclusive of malaria. Okay, so that's why it's right here. Then the next highest is virology, virology, tropical diseases, and HIV. Okay. So again, you could also deep dive into the table to get the various data points. Now here, this is where you would be able to see some potential subject categories that you might want to explore. Say, for example, phytochemicals. In terms of CNCI, you're very close to 1, okay? And perhaps this is and you have very low international collaboration here, which means to say, even without the help of international collaborators, you're performing quite close to global average. So in that sense, this could be a potential research area that Mahidol University might want to explore to improve or increase the research spectrum that you have in Mahidol University. Okay. So these few screens, I will just go into the live demonstration. Okay. So this last demonstration that I will show you is on how you can analyze the research areas. So just go to Analyze Research Areas. Okay. And make sure you select the relevant schema that you want. So I've included citation topics. Then under the left-hand side here, you choose the filter to limit this to an organization name. So the organization name that I want to look for will be Mahidol University, and then update. So these research areas here, these 10 macro topics, all belong to Mahidol University. Okay. If you want to drill down to the meso topics, you can click here and you would be able to see the meso topics under clinical and life sciences. Then under parasitology, you can click again and you would see the micro topics. So malaria here is at 610 papers. Okay. Then the next thing that you might want to filter down to is perhaps looking at the collaborations. So you might want to analyze your international collaborations. So if you click on selecting filter for international collaboration only and update, this will then show you all your research areas, and these are only those that have been internationally collaborated. So that's why your percentage of international collaboration is 100%. And from here, you can immediately see which are those collaborations that bring you the highest impact. Okay. And which are the ones that are not giving you enough impact for your research performance. All right. You can also do the same thing for only your domestic collaborated papers. And it will give you a different picture. Okay. Okay, so that is for research areas. You can actually change the level to meso as well, so that you can immediately see the meso levels and sort them accordingly to different indicators, depending on what you want to see. Okay. Okay, so that would be all that I have to show you today. Okay, but that's not all that I will cover. Okay, what I want to do is to make sure that I have addressed all your questions. So if you have any things that you want me to repeat or show again, this is the opportunity you have to ask me to do that. So if you have any questions or you want me to repeat any parts, do type them into the chat now. Okay. While we're waiting for those questions to come in, we do have another session next week, I believe. So for next week's session, what I'll be covering will no longer be about the basic features and functionalities like what I showed today, but I will be going into a deep dive into specific use cases and how you can answer some of these research questions that you might have for yourself. Okay, so if you are coming for the next session, which is next week, I encourage you to drop me an email if for any specific use cases that you might want me to cover for the next session. Okay, so I'm going to type my email into the chat box. Okay. Email, just drop me an email to let me know any specific use cases you might want to see next week. But in general, for next week, I will be covering things like identifying international collaborators for yourself more accurately, and then also covering benchmarking, how you can compare yourself against other institutions based on subject areas and so on. Okay. Okay, so Wanaruk, you have another question. So percentage of documents in GIF. So let me just include that here. Documents. Okay, so apply. So you do notice that there is only the document counts right here. So documents in GIF. Just put that over here. So you notice that there's only a documents in GIF. There's no percentage. So the percentage is manually calculated. Okay. So these are papers that are published in journals that have a journal impact factor. So the journals that have a journal impact factor are those that are indexed in SCIE, which is the Science Citation Index Expanded, and the Social Science Citation Index. Okay, so if you want to limit this to quartiles, that is also possible. So if you want to filter this down to Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, that's also filterable. So you can update this. Then you can see that the 363 papers have been published in Q1 journals from Web of Science. Okay. So I hope that answers your question. So can we conclude that more percentage gives more quality? Usually the indicator for quality, as what my slides suggest, is actually in terms of Q1. So here is my framework. Yes. So this is the framework. So for quality, we usually look at the percentage of documents in Q1 journals specifically. The reason is because we did a correlation study before where we looked at the impact of those institutions who publish a lot more in Q1 Web of Science journals. It usually means and translates to higher impact if they have a higher Q1 publication rate. So it's a bit like the petrol in the car. Okay, so for the car to move, okay, and meaning for the institution to have research impact, you need to have the fuel. So the fuel is usually the Q1 journals. Okay, so just take note for quality, higher percentage in Q1 usually reflects the higher percentage of quality publications from the institution. Okay. Okay. Seems like there's no further questions from the audience. So I will not go further into too much details now. Okay, I will give you time to go back and digest the information that I provided today. Take some time to review the recordings if you are still not too clear. Alternatively, there are some resources on the resource center. On the bottom right, you see this question mark. That is where the resource center is. And you can get some product updates right here. What are the latest features that have been included? You're also able to see some getting started guides. Okay. And if you want further detailed training, so if you're interested in bibliometrics, for example, okay, we do have a training resource here. So you can click on training resource. And you can enroll for this self-guided learning so that you can understand more about bibliometrics analysis using the InCites data. Okay. So we have all these different videos that you can go through as well. Okay. Other than that, if you have any questions or issues, either you drop me an email or you can also submit an inquiry right here. So that's it for me. Let me just go back here to my slides. Okay. So you can screen grab, you can actually scan this QR code to immediately go to this self-guided learning module as well. Okay. But other than that, this is my final slide. If you have any further questions, drop me an email. But I do hope that today's session was useful for you. And thank you, Ms. Kanita, for helping to arrange today's session. And I look forward to meeting all of you again next week for more in-depth use case session. Right. So back to you, Ms. Kanita. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Julin. So everyone, we will meet us again on